My background's in directing and often really collaborative directing, so I often co-direct, I'm often a dramaturg, so I quite often come into people's projects, so other people's dream worlds, and try and help them to sort of realise those things. So with this, it's an Improbable production. It's my first time working with Improbable. Okay. So I think they were looking for someone who could hold that space and be that collaborative person. So I met them specifically for this, and at the time when we met, it was a show about the space that gets left when a dream doesn't get realised. So I found that really exciting to start with, and then the empty space, yeah, that kind of like that void that feels completely hopeless, but actually you can think about it as containing a lot of possibility. So it's, you know, when your dreams get smashed, you're desolate, aren't you? And there's this thing you really wanted to make happen, and it's gone. But the brilliant thing about that moment is that you don't know what's going to happen, and so in that moment when no one's certain, anything could happen. I mean, the journey of the show's been huge, and I was really around for the last year of it, really. So last summer we started having conversations. We went to New York to meet Phillip and to work with him, and basically sit in a room with him for a week while he played us music.
Wow.
I know.
Were you familiar with his music before, or is this kind of like...
Yeah, I was. I'm not a sort of super fan like Phelim, but I know more of his music than I thought I did, because films, you know. So I think everyone knows his music, but they don't necessarily know that they know Phillip Glass music. So, but if you've watched any films in the last sort of 10 years or longer, then you'll recognise that music. And yeah, it was extraordinary, really, to be in a room with Phillip Glass playing you some music. I think I did actually spend quite a lot of that week crying, just sort of a bit dazed that it was happening. It was how it got made. You've seen it. So the making of the show is sort of the show. The story of that process is what you're told. And yeah, it definitely it was a really interesting process because from a really early point, Phillip wrote loads of music. And so there was suddenly this, in a way it felt like we were racing to try and keep up with Phillip, or to catch up with him, because he was sort of 10 steps ahead of us. New music, completely new music, like 10 pieces. Wow. Yeah. And so, and it's sort of brilliant and challenging, because you're at the stage where you don't know anything about a show. So you're going, what is it? How does it start? How does it end? You're asking yourself all these questions, but there's this really solid thing that exists, which is the music. So, it was an interesting way to work. So many people, and lots of people who I don't know. So that process before I joined also had collaborators who were in the room. I think the first workshop in New York that I wasn't present at, there were 3 puppeteers who did 0 puppetry all week, but just sort of sat and thought and talked, and so lots and lots and lots of people. And then we had workshops with different performers, and we found the 3 performers who were in the show, obviously the musicians, and everyone who joins the conversation kind of changes the show. So Chris, our MD, has been working with that music to help us thread it through the piece that we've made. Everyone really is part of the conversation. So Colin, our lighting designer, Fly, our designer, the design is so integral to the meaning of the show that really, the set that you see that moves and creates all of those images that takes you to sort of different levels of consciousness. That was a really important part of the making process, was figuring out what that design was.
Which was specifically designed to take you to different levels of consciousness. Is that right?
Yeah. So we really wanted it to be something that didn't feel like it was demonstrating, but it was actually dynamically doing something to you when they move, and they move in lots of different ways, and really, and they do something strange to your perspective sometimes when you're watching them, and the first time they move is a sort of Mickey falling into dreamland. So there's this experience as the ring rises up that you're sort of sinking down and going deeper and deeper, and you sort of keep going down and down during the show until you reach the essence level. And Giles, our sound designer as well, has worked really closely with our musical director and with Phillip, who's been around a lot, sort of working out how the world of sound effects interacts with the world of music, or when the musicians can create the sound effects. So that's really part of Phelim's world, that puppetry of objects. And it's quite interesting being part of this process, because I like to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I like to know like where that comes from and why it's on stage and what it means, and because you're asking people to invest in it as an object. So we started to talk about some of them maybe being the score. So some of those pieces of paper having the score on, and then the further in we just went, it should all be the score. It's all the music. It doesn't, a piece of paper falling is one thing, but music, like literally raining down out of the, from the ceiling, it means something different. A little bit, yeah. And I love a bit of meditation. So I practice transcendental meditation. So it sort of felt quite familiar in a lot of ways. But formally, what we wanted the show to do was really broadly go from sort of talk. It's all talk. There's no music really at the beginning. It's just words and language, and then moving from that into something that feels a bit more dreamlike and a bit more about images and making pictures. And then at the bottom of it, there's nothing except the music. So I think it's really unusual to be trying to build up throughout a show to doing nothing. Like normally people are like, this is when it gets really dynamic, and this is when. And with this, we were just like, I think we always felt like the end point was to try and lead people to a place where you were going to sit in a theatre for pretty much half an hour at the end of the show, because there's two pieces that are very still, and you would feel okay just listening with. Really no one's doing anything except the musicians who are playing the music. It's not.
But it's not.
I don't find that shows ever are.
Right,
You can't. It's my least favourite thing when people say, when are we going to lock this down? And you're like, what does that mean? Like, you can't lock it down. It's live. It's
free.
Yeah, things will happen that are beyond your control. And, there's obviously... When you really learn a show, there's, there are fixed points, and there are things that you probably won't ever change. But and if you get the foundations really solid, then you can play on the top, I think. So it's absolutely not.
So you're still going to be playing on the top.
Yeah, we're still playing on the top a lot. Well, I'm deep into this, but my head, it's a strange thing that happens when you start to, one show is kind of opening, and then you're sort of preparing to go to another one straight away. So my next project is a completely different show called Rich Kids, A History of Shopping Malls in Tehran, with an artist called Javad Alipur, who I collaborated with a couple of years ago, and we made a show called The Believers Are But Brothers, which is about extremism and the internet and men. And that show has toured all over the world and is still knocking around, and this is our new project, which is opening in Edinburgh this summer.
August.
Yeah,
month.
soon. It's an incredible atmosphere in the city, and it starts to feel a bit like a village, like you keep bumping into people, so it's lovely. And we've seen some shows, but not really very much. We've been in that dark module trying to get this to come to life. Yeah.
Well, you certainly did that. And
thank
I've also
you.
proved that dreams do come true.
Yeah, and they're never what you think they're going to be.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Cheers.